Should it be legal? Should we just have done with it? Or should we be even tougher on it? Or is it just OK as it is? Peter Hitchens.
Well, even tougher, Michelle. And we're not tough on it. You go out into the street outside this building, you can smell it. Policemen will walk past people who are openly smoking it. We're not tough on marijuana. We haven't been tough on marijuana for 30 years. The deputy head of the Scotland Yard Flying Squad declared it a decriminalised drug in 1994, and it seems to me now to be 2022. The classification is completely meaningless, because if no one arrests anybody for it, no one is prosecuted for it. So, as a result, people get used to the idea that it is effectively decriminalised de facto. The next step, of the horrifying possible step of legalisation, would mean it being advertised, perhaps on your station, advertised in the newspapers, advertised on billboards, sold openly in chains of chemists or in supermarkets, and, of course, deliverable by internet. And this is a drug which is far, far more dangerous than people realised when they first softened the law on it back in 1971. It's the correlation, the connection between its use and severe mental illness is shocking. And I think almost anybody now who's in touch with life in this country knows that this is the case, knows somebody whose life has been at least seriously disrupted by its use. And the other thing about it, and this is absolutely fascinating, is we don't know how much drugs are involved in crime in this country, because there is now so much crime that very little of it is reported in the media. The only subsets of crime which are thoroughly reported in the media now tend to be rampage killings, mass shootings, things of that kind. In those crimes, the presence of marijuana in the lives of the culprits is not invariable, but incredibly common. I take, for instance, the killers in the Bataclan shootings in Paris, the recent mass shooting in Uvalde in Texas, and in many, many others. The culprits turn out to have had long-standing marijuana use. The idea that we're not tough enough on it, and that we could be even tougher when we're not tough at all, is absurd. And the idea that we should legalise it is more or less national suicide. If you want a straightforward, one-way ticket to the third world, the legalisation of marijuana is the way.
One-way ticket to the third world, legalising cannabis, Jo?
Obviously, Peter has very well articulated his opinions. Just to put it in context, this idea didn't just appear in the Sunday Times. This came from the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, speaking at a Fringe meeting, with apparently no authority from government and no backing from government. So she's had to row back from it because the government has said that there are no plans to change the classification of cannabis. The idea that it should be reclassified as a Class A drug along with heroin and really, really serious addictive drugs is utterly bonkers. And as Peter rightly says, to a certain extent, it has de facto been decriminalised for personal use. However, if we go down this route that Suella Braverman on her own, or with the support of Conservative Party members who she seems to be appealing to, of increasing or changing the classification or getting tougher on it, you're actually making it better and more attractive for criminals, because the risks are greater, so therefore the costs are going to be greater. And it also means we're sort of going backwards, where everywhere else in the world, pretty much, is actually legalising and decriminalising. I mean, only this week, Joe Biden has given a blanket pardon to people who have been serving sentences or are serving sentences for possession for personal use. And one of the reasons he did that, and I think it's really important to make this point, is that there is a disproportionate number of young black people who are criminalised for possession of cannabis. And so they've got a record for something that is, frankly, so minor. The other thing that I would talk about is that there is a link between excessive use of cannabis and mental health, as Peter rightly says. But one of the reasons for that is because what is being used and what is being sold is really, really strong. And it is grown because there's an awful lot of money to be made by criminals who I don't think usually stop at one thing. If they're involved in cannabis, they're probably involved in other drugs and possibly money.
So do you think it should be legalised then?
Yes, I do.
So you think it should be legalised? You're saying that it's a one-way ticket to a third world country.
Absolutely, it is, yes.
Well, I've been to Amsterdam and used cannabis there, as many of my viewers might be familiar with. It's legal there. That's not a third world country.
It's not actually legal there, but it's there's a limited decriminalisation. But actually, the Amsterdam, if you read the accounts of crime in the Netherlands, is now a city with a very, very serious drug crime problem and gang problems.
It's not a third world country, though, is it? It's a lovely place.
No, it isn't yet a third world country, nor are the other countries which are beginning on this long road. But if they go, as the Netherlands have not, for legalisation, then who knows what next. Points about legalisation. Take Canada, a whole country, or Colorado, a state of the United States. In both those countries, the legalisation of marijuana has not been followed by a removal of criminal gangs from the trade. On the contrary, they flourish. In fact, in large parts of the United States where legalisation has happened, the criminal gangs sell far more marijuana than they did before, or than the legal outlets. This is always a myth, because as soon as a drug is legalised, it's taxed and regulated, and that means that people can make an awful lot of money by evading that regulation. The idea that legalisation will remove crime from the trade is a fantasy, and has been proven to be a fantasy by the experience of several American states and of Canada. That doesn't work. When Joe Biden pardoned all these people who were supposedly languishing in prison for marijuana possession, as far as I know, the Wall Street Journal said this morning, absolutely nobody was actually released.
No,
because there was nobody in prison for marijuana
is...
possession, because there hasn't been anybody in prison for simple marijuana possession for decades. It's a fantasy of the drug legalizers that this is going on. What we do over and over again is we attack the suppliers. We go on and on about the cartels and the evil dealers, and we say what terrible people these are, and we make some vague legal effort to suppress them. We do nothing about the people who actually commit the crime of possessing and using the drug, which is the reason why it's illegal in the first place, because the drug is dangerous. And we look and look and look for Mr. Big. But in fact, the drug trade is financed by millions of Mr. and Mrs. and Miss Smalls, funneling their pounds and dollars and euros by the billion into the cartels by buying this filthy substance, which, as I say, ruins their lives and very frequently ruins the lives of their families as well. It's absurd to say that it can't be controlled. Japan and South Korea, civilized, law-governed, democratic countries, both successfully resist the marijuana menace by prosecuting possession seriously. And if you go there and act as you do here, you get into very serious trouble. And I would say, as a result, it's certainly correlated, the problem there is much, much less than it is here.